All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Life and Whatever Else. We're here in the studios upstairs at the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, 59th Street between 10th and 11th Avenue. Um, and as you could see, today I'm going solo. Pablo Carlos couldn't make it. And for the rest of 2017, I was hoping to kind of keep that mix together, but they'll be back. And then in 2018, we'll have some more guests on the show. But for tonight, I am going solo. It's just me. So since it's just me, I might jump around a little bit and talk about a couple different things that have come up recently. And I think let's get started. The first thing that I wanted to talk about, let's see here, was here in New York, a little sports topic. For those of you who know, I am a New York Giants fan, and I have been a fan of the Giants ever since I started watching football. And this year has not been one of the Giants' best years. They came in with high expectations. Everybody thought that the Giants would, win the division. Maybe not everybody. There were people who picked the Cowboys too, but there were a lot of people who picked the Giants to win the division. And, they were kind of a sneaky pick to go to the Super Bowl. As we all know, that has kind of fallen apart this season. Things just didn't go well. We had the Odell Beckham, hit in the preseason from the Cleveland Browns player. I forgot exactly who it was, but he hit him low, and from that point on, it seems like the season has been in a downward spiral. We've had injuries. There have been players who have been suspended. Just overall poor play. And then the topper, which was the benching of Eli Manning. And, something that I wanted to say, and we kind of got into it a little bit when Pablo was here the other day. One of the things that I wanted to say about the Eli Manning benching was just that, first of all, and I think this speaks to how poorly McAdoo and Reese is also gone, and I'll get into him a little later, but I think this speaks to how poorly they handled it, in the sense that I think if they went to Eli Manning with, like, say, 2 weeks left in the season and said, hey, Eli, we want to get a look at Davis Webb. Not Geno Smith, Davis Webb. And, we respect your streak and we respect everything that you've done for the organization. Would you mind, going out there, playing the first quarter, maybe even playing the first drive or something like that, and then letting us put in Webb so that we can see what he's got and his ability and see what he can do over the course of a game? I think had they gone to Eli with that in mind for the final, say, 2 weeks of the season, I really think Eli would have gone with it, because I think at that point you'd really be playing for nothing. It would just be 2 games left, and you could actually see what Davis Webb's skill set is. However, they decided to go about this, in my opinion, in totally the wrong way. They go to him with 5 games left in the season and basically say, Eli, can you play half? And then we're going to put in Geno Smith. And if you put in Geno Smith, first of all, he was a Jet. And we know what he did when he was with the Jets. It wasn't very good. If he was a good quarterback, he'd still be with them. But, he's not with the Jets and he's with the Giants now, which was another head-scratching signing. I didn't really understand it. But, you don't go to Geno Smith. You go to Davis Webb. And you go to Eli, right at this point, right at the same point that they're going to bench him, and you come to him with the plan and you tell him this is what we want to do. I think that Eli would have gone with it at that point. If you putting Geno Smith in this position is weird, because it's like what you're basically saying is that by the time we want to bench you, Eli, but by the time we're going to bench you, who knows if the game is out of hand or not. So we're gonna put Geno Smith in just for really the hell of it in the second half, just to kind of make a point. It was just a mind-boggling decision. I can't understand why they decided to do it that way. I've always been under the belief that Eli being here is the best thing for this organization in the sense that Eli should be the quarterback until they know exactly who their guy is. It could be Davis Webb. They could draft somebody, which I would see. No matter how Davis Webb played, I want to see them draft a quarterback in the first round. Um, but I think that, you know, I think Eli should be the quarterback until then. With all the chaos going around this organization, I mean, the suspensions, injuries, disciplinary, issues, the lack of performance on the field at times, Eli provided that stability. And I think that it would have been nice to have seen him start at quarterback until they found their next guy. Geno was not going to be that next guy. We're not sure if Davis Webb is going to be that next guy. But Eli should have never been removed until they knew exactly what they were going to do. You also put Geno Smith and Davis Webb in an odd predicament because in the situation that they're in, you're basically asking, and I'm thinking more along the lines of Webb here. I'm not really thinking as much about Geno. Got something in my eye. Sorry, guys. But I'm thinking more in regards to Davis Webb and his potential future. It's almost unfair now because the GM that drafted him and the coach that was coaching him, they're not there anymore. So now you have a young kid at quarterback who you want to look at his skills. But if he performs, and John Mara, who's the owner, who I have issues with as well, if he comes out and he says Davis Webb is going to be our guy of the future, why would a coach want to come into a situation and have to inherit a quarterback that he may not want? He may want to draft a young quarterback and, see what that young quarterback could do. Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, potentially a Baker Mayfield type out of Oklahoma. He may want to draft a quarterback like that and just kind of, get a guy who is his guy. Putting Davis Webb in this position now, it's almost like, you're setting him up to fail. And I don't really like that. I think that was kind of the luxury that you have and you could still have with Eli. Just play him until you know what you're going to do. I think that a new regime is okay, bringing Eli back to kind of serve as that mentor. Like I picture Eli at this point kind of being Kurt Warner to whoever the next quarterback is, that guy who's kind of starts the season, but he knows eventually somebody's going to take over for him. I mean, eventually when the play really goes downhill. But yeah, I just thought the whole situation was handled so poorly by everybody involved, including, John Mara. I think John Mara, because he's the owner, you're not going to fire yourself, obviously. But I almost think that he gets a pass for this situation, at least in his head, because I think that Mara kind of thinks, okay, well, I fired these guys. That's what the fan base wanted. We're going to put Eli back as starter, and everything is going to be good. We're going to go find a coach, GM, and we're going to go from there. And I think that, he has got to be a better owner for this franchise to succeed. I think under his watch, even though they've won Super Bowls, and yes, he's going to get credit for those, absolutely. But I also think that there have been a lot of instances where the organization has not really looked like the classy organization that everybody says they are. I mean, the way that Tom Coughlin was dismissed or retired, Kevin Gilbride, retired. This Eli Manning situation. It's been kind of a mess with the organization. Not disciplining certain players and disciplining others. It's been a mess, and I think ultimately he's got to be a better owner for this franchise to succeed. Jerry Reese, Jerry Reese, he's gone. I mean, I don't really know. I was never a huge fan of him as GM. I think while he contributed to Super Bowl teams, those Super Bowl teams were, kind of the core was put together by Ernie Accorsi. Um, and I think Reese kind of inherited a good position. I think Reese's strength, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Isaiah Thomas in a sense. And what I mean by that is that Isaiah Thomas as the lead executive, as like the man of an organization, I don't know if he was best suited for that role. However, he did have a pretty decent eye for talent, and I think he brought a lot of good talent to the Knicks. Now, that a lot of that talent might have not stayed with the Knicks, but I think that he brought a lot of good talent. I think he was more suited for a role just being able to bring guys in to kind of contribute. I think what happened with Reese when he became the the general manager is he wanted to continue, because I think he was director of player personnel. I believe that was his previous position. And I almost feel like what he wanted to do was, I almost feel like he was more interested in kind of identifying like diamonds in the rough and taking chances on guys who are maybe slipping in the draft or whatever, but he sees something in them, like he looks at their combine, or he sees something that they did on the field, and I think he wants to take chances on those guys. And I totally understand why you'd want to get certain guys, guys like a Beckham, guys like an Evan Ingram. Could totally understand that. But I think for those guys, he never took into consideration that he also has to bring in guys who may not necessarily have the best tools, but have a lot of heart, have a lot of desire. And I don't know if he did that. And I think that that's kind of why he ultimately failed as GM, because he brought in, I feel, I guess you could kind of say low motor guys. I think when you bring in a lot of guys who are really talented, I think what ends up happening is that a lot of those guys rely on their talent, and they've never had to rely on anything else. They've never had to, grind something out. I've always been bigger, faster, stronger, could jump higher, whatever the case may be. And I think that Reese got enamored with those type of players. Like every player you heard come in, like I think of a Ramses Barden. Oh, look, he's 6'5". He's a target like Plaxico Burress. But Ramses Barden never really materialized. Look at like a David Wilson almost. David Wilson, big play guy, ended up getting hurt and had to retire. So I think that Jerry Reese was always enamored with kind of the big play, or, that I can sell you on something. Like I was big on players he could sell people on. I don't know if he was always good with the players who were like, you know what, this guy's not necessarily as talented, but he gets the most out of what he has. And Jerry Reese never found those players, and I think ultimately that's why he ended up failing. I mean, look at what he did this offseason. Instead of going out there and getting, instead of kind of revamping the offensive line and, kind of, shoring up the running back position, basically what he did was he said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to go get fancy toys, and we're just going to try and mask our problems. So we're going to get Ingram, we're going to get Brandon Marshall, and we're going to make everything look nice, even though we know it's not. Basically what he was trying to say is our offensive line is bad, so what we're going to do is get a lot of guys to throw to so they can go make the plays. And it didn't work out. I didn't think it was going to work out. I just didn't think they'd be 2-10. I thought that they would figure it out and make the playoffs. I just didn't think the offense was going to be as explosive as maybe people thought. But, when you have a situation like this, they've gotten rid of the GM, gotten rid of the coach. They're going to go into the offseason looking for that. I'm sure that there'll be people who want the job. And we'll see John Gruden, maybe a Harbaugh, Nick Saban. I'm not always sold on college coaches, but I think that they can be. I think a veteran coach is what they need. I think a Gruden type, a Harbaugh. If they're gonna get a college coach, Harbaugh is the guy that I would get. Maybe somebody who's currently in a position, in the NFL. Maybe they try to lure him away But we'll see what happens with that. But unfortunately, we have to kind of endure this 2-10 season. Or 2-10 so far. Who knows how much worse it could get playing Dallas on Sunday. Um, so let's see here. Moving on here. We have another sports topic. UFC 218 just took place over the weekend. Max Holloway defeated Jose Aldo. Featherweight title fight. Francis Ngannou delivered a devastating knockout of Alistair Overeem. Henry Cejudo, kind of a workmanlike performance over Sergio Pettis. What else was there? What was the other fight? Yeah, Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje delivered on the promise of it being uh you know a real fight of like attrition. Really delivered. And Tisha Torres beat Michelle Waterson. Good performance for Tisha Torres. I'm sorry for saying so much. I know I'm saying it. One thing that I want to talk about, just a couple things actually. Justin Gaethje and Eddie Alvarez. Terrific fight, back and forth. A really good fight. My belief, again, I'm saying I'm so sorry guys for saying that so many times. One of the feelings that I had about this fight going into it was Eddie Alvarez was an underdog in the fight, and it was weird it was kind of a weird fight because it to me it had the feeling of one of those fights where Eddie Alvarez is an underdog, but he's the underdog that it's almost like he's a live dog. Like, people looked at him as an underdog from a betting standpoint, but in terms of the actual fight, I think there were a lot of people that thought he would win. I was kind of thinking as the fight was going on that maybe this is the fight that, I thought that Justin Gaethje was going to come in there and kind of beat him, because Eddie kind of is always on that edge. It always seems like he's on that edge of he always looks like he's on that edge of good fighter on the back end of his career. And I thought that this was one of those fights where people were going to start saying, oh, Eddie Alvarez is on the back end of his career maybe. Justin Gaethje comes in World Series of Fighting or whatever. I think it's Professional Fighters Association, something like that. I forget exactly what it's called now. But I thought personally this might be one of those fights where it's like, oh, Gaethje's going to, beat him, when people kind of don't think. It's one of those weird fights. It's like I said, it's almost like Eddie Alvarez was an underdog, but people thought he would win. And I thought that Gaethje, being an underdog, was actually or being a favorite, he was actually, like, people looked at him as like a favorite who was an underdog. So it's almost like the roles were reversed. But Alvarez, Hunter, I also thought he was kind of small. I've always thought Eddie Alvarez was a real small 155-pound fighter, but he fought Gaethje. It was a tough fight. It was a brutal fight. I think Gaethje might have gotten a little too overconfident in the fight, and I think he might have just gotten used to, that stand and bang type of fight. And, Alvarez just prevailed in the end, hit him with a knee, and hit him with a knee right on the button, right on the chin. And when he hit him with that knee, Gaethje went down, and the fight was over right at that point. Yeah, Eddie Alvarez. Sorry, I'm a little tired too. But he beat him, and I thought it was a big win for Eddie, because I think it was a win that Eddie Alvarez needed. Because I think coming off of he's coming off the Conor McGregor loss that he had, where he got starched in that fight. Eddie needs every win like he can get, because sometimes there are things that are etched into people's minds, and I think that he's got a good following and he's got support, and I think he's a guy that kind of has to stay ahead of. And I hope people understand what I'm saying here. I think Eddie Alvarez is the type of guy that's got to stay ahead of the curve. I don't think that he can kind of fall behind, go on a losing streak, and people will still. I don't think he'll get those opportunities if he goes on a losing streak. I think he's got to stay ahead, win every fight that he can. and he did. So he took care of that, and he took care of Gagey. It'll be interesting to see where Gagey goes. I was listening to Brendan Schaub last night. He said that Gagey loses to a lot of the guys at the top of 155. I don't know about that. I think Gagey will swing his way to a couple victories. I wouldn't be shocked. I think a guy like Khabib, I think it's weird. I think he's got the style to beat Khabib in this sense that he's going to try and stand and bang. And I think that if he just catches him with a punch, he can knock him out. I think if it gets into a drag-out fight, he'll lose, obviously. But I could just see him knocking off some guys just purely based on, swinging for the fences. But that was that fight. And then we'll actually go to the main event before we go to Francis Ngannou. Main event: Max Holloway defeated Jose Aldo. Featherweight title. It was an okay fight. Kind of what I expected. I expected Holloway to win the fight. I thought that it would have been a better fight if Aldo was not a short notice replacement for Frankie Edgar. I would have liked to have seen him have a full training camp and be fully prepared for his fights. He also cuts a lot of weight to get to 145. I think maybe he should go to 155. I'd like to see him at 155 and see what happens there. I also think that if he goes to 155 and performs well, he can get his rematch with McGregor, because I don't think McGregor is ever going to come down to 145 again. And, with that being said, if he's not going to come down to 145, I don't think that he is going to fight a Max Holloway. He beat him one time. I think McGregor is going to pick his opponents. I think McGregor's going to pick his opponents really carefully from now on. I don't think that he is going to be of the mindset, oh yeah, this guy's the champion, let's do this. I think he's looking like, what does this fight do for me? Does it make me a lot of money? Is it going to further me? I think he looks at fights like that now. And I think that with that being said, he's got his eyes on GSP, I think. I think that he wants to fight GSP. I wouldn't be shocked if Conor McGregor does not have another MMA fight, and he basically says, my next fight is going to be in boxing unless GSP wants to fight. Because I think that Conor is kind of past this, like, fighting contenders. And it's kind of the UFC's, maybe the UFC is a little at fault for this, because I think the UFC has to get back to making title fights matter, not giving out interim titles, and making title fights matter, and not just kind of giving out belts to anybody who wants them. Oh man, sorry guys. Yeah, sorry for yawning so much, but I think that the UFC has got to, get guys back to fighting each other for the championships and taking care of that, because I think some of these fights, it's tough to watch some of these fighters like beg for fights after fights. I think like, I just beat this guy, so now I'm going to go beat this one's ass and everything like that. And then you get just like terrible trash talk from a lot of guys, and it's not that fun, but they're trying to do it to get, the big fight, the big money fight that they want. So, Holloway had called him out. I don't think McGregor's going to fight Holloway. Holloway looked good. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I should be better at this. I can't really think of who's next at featherweight for him. I'm sure I guess Frankie Edgar. I guess Frankie Edgar would be that dude. But so I think Frankie Edgar would be that dude. If that doesn't materialize, hold on, let me see something before we continue here. Let me see. I want to check something here. Since I'm by myself, I have to like go on my like Twitter and my phone here to see everything. Just saw that the Knicks won a game, needed that win. let me see here. Mm, Yeah, I would think. I mean, I would think that Frankie Edgar would probably be the next fight for Max Holloway. He had to pull out of this one, but I would imagine that Frankie Edgar would be the next guy in line. Uh, he might not be. I'm not as well versed in the featherweights as I should be, but I would imagine that would be the next fight. So Connor's probably not gonna fight Max. He can call him out all he wants. I don't think that's gonna happen, and we kind of just move on from there. So the big kind of star coming out of this pay-per-view is Francis Ngannou, um, knocking out Alistair Overeem in the first round with a ridiculous uppercut. The uppercut, I mean, I'd have to look at it again. I didn't even think that the uppercut landed all the way. Like, it almost looked like it was like scraping the side of his head, but he threw with so much power that he knocked him out. And I mean, it was spectacular. I was telling my friend who was at the bar, actually it was Carlos, I was at the bar with Carlos watching the fight. I told him that if Overeem gets knocked out, it's going to be a spectacular knockout, because Overeem doesn't do these quick stoppages or something like that. It's definitive when he gets knocked out. And lo and behold, he was knocked out in spectacular fashion. So with that win, Ngannou basically booked himself a title fight with Stipe Miocic. That fight is looking like it's going to take place at UFC 220 in Boston, which will be in January. That's really close. It's a couple months, which is pretty interesting. It doesn't give you that much time to really build Ngannou up. However, maybe one of the advantages that you have with a Francis Ngannou is that a guy like Francis Ngannou, you don't. Some people say that you have to have him talk, and he doesn't talk that great English and stuff like that. But I tend to think that maybe one of Francis Ngannou's strongest assets is almost that he doesn't have to talk. I mean, if he just continues to knock guys out in ridiculous fashion, I just think he doesn't have to talk, and I think he can become a major star in that sense. He's like that guy he's like the boogeyman almost. He's like that guy who just strikes fear into the heart of his opponents. In fact, I'd be really interested. I'm really interested in seeing Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic, because I just really don't see how Stipe will beat him. Again, sorry for the yawn, guys. I just don't see how Stipe can beat him. I think that Stipe. I think that Stipe is a good fighter. I think maybe part of his success is due to the heavyweight division not really being that good, and I also think part of his success was because Verdum decided to show up in Brazil and start clowning around in the cage. And I think maybe had Verdum showed up to fight and not showed up to clown around, maybe we wouldn't even be talking about Stipe as champion. So I think this fight with Ngannou, I just don't think Stipe has the tools to beat Ngannou. I think if he tries to stand with him, he's gonna lose. And one of the other things was Overeem came into this fight 247 pounds. I underestimated the size of Ngannou, to be honest with you. I was here thinking this whole time that he was like 245, 240. Oh, man. Sorry for yawning so much. But I'm here thinking that he was like 245, 250 maybe. But he has like a huge 200. He was like a huge 262 pounds. I mean, Overeem, was deflated because he's not allowed to take whatever he was taking before. And so, he went from like jacked, ripped 265 to now down to 247. I actually thought Overeem looked really good. Body-wise, I actually thought that was probably the best he's looked since, his issues with USADA and whatever. I thought that was the best that Overeem looked in the cage. and from a physical standpoint. But when they got in and they got into the clinch, I mean, Ngannou's size, he was so big and so strong in there. I just don't see how Stipe can deal with that. I really don't see how Stipe can deal with that. I just think that Stipe is in big trouble because I you know, if you get into a fight with him, he's gonna knock you out. I just don't think that you can last 5 rounds, small gloves, the whole 9 yards. I just don't think that you can last 5 rounds with him. And I don't think that Stipe is the type of guy that has the tools to really be able to wear him out, because you can't box him for 5 rounds and hope to beat him. So I don't really know what Stipe is gonna do with Ngannou, but I just think Ngannou can be champion, and then we'll take it from there. I mean, I think personally the only guy who has the skills to beat him. Actually, there are two guys who I think could beat him. A healthy Cain Velasquez, even though I don't know if he'll ever truly be healthy again. And I actually think that Daniel Cormier could beat him, because I think Daniel Cormier is a guy who I could definitely see giving him fits if he went back up to heavyweight to fight him. Oh man, I think I'm gonna need a nap soon, because I keep yawning and like I'm trying not to yawn, but geez, I'm sorry. So yeah, I just think that I think that like Francis is kind of on a track for the heavyweight championship. And, the other guy that would be interesting to see Francis fight would be Mark Hunt. I think Mark Hunt would be an interesting fight. Kind of old knockout artist, new knockout artist, kind of do one of those deals. That would be a really interesting fight to see somewhere down the line. So we'll see what happens. That should be a really good fight. UFC 220 is what it's looking like. It's not. I don't think it's confirmed yet, but that's what it's looking like. UFC 220 in Boston, and that's gonna be that. So let's see here. We're jumping around here, and I hate to end on this note, but I wanted to end on. I was hoping that there were some other things to kind of end with, but before I came in, this is going to be the last thing I kind of talk about on this show. Before I came in earlier today, I was looking at Twitter, and as I was going through it, there was an adult entertainer. Her name was August Ames. She was a rising. I followed her on Twitter. She was like a rising star in like the adult entertainment world. An adult star, did a lot of movies, got a lot of nominations for awards and things of that nature. I had read that she had passed away. She committed suicide. Or at least all signs are pointing towards suicide. It's really sad. It's a really sad case, because the other day there was, in the adult industry, there's different kind of niches, and she had put out a tweet saying that she didn't want to work with a performer who was in it, who had done gay porn in the past, and she was saying that she didn't want to work with this particular performer because of that. And when she put out that tweet, there were a lot of people on Twitter that proceeded to really say a lot of mean and vicious things to her. There were some people who were saying, you should die, things like that. It was rough. People said some really rough things. And, a couple days later, she, commits suicide. And it's just such a tragic story, because she's only 23 years old. She had gotten into the industry in like 2013, and beautiful girl, everything like that. And it's tragic, to lose anybody at 23. It doesn't really matter what industry somebody is in. They could be an athlete, they could be an actor, they could be a lawyer, they could be a doctor, whatever. To lose somebody at 23 years old is devastating. And she killed herself. There's no information exactly on what happened, they're not releasing the information yet, but it's also it's tragic. Like, it's messed up on like a couple fronts. The first one is, we should never bully people. I think that's like the first thing that people have to get through their heads, which it bothers me, because like people go on Twitter, and when they go on Twitter, it's so weird. I think Twitter's such a new form. It's such a new medium that I think a lot of people don't really know how to handle Twitter right now. I think we all thought we knew how to handle it, but I think we live in like this world where on Twitter you can be yourself without actually being yourself. Like in public, for example, if there's a certain level of decorum that you have to have, almost like in public. So even if people want to talk about you, they'll talk about you behind your back, and it's almost like, okay, well, I don't get to see that side of you. On Twitter, though, it's almost, and they talk behind your back because they don't think that they could do it to your face. And so you never hear it, though. You might hear somebody say, oh, yeah, so-and-so said this and that, but it might be hearsay, things like that. However, on Twitter, we live in this world now where on Twitter, people are themselves without actually being themselves. And that's such an interesting thing to me, because it's like you look in Twitter and you look at these Twitter profiles that people have, it's their pictures, it's what they're doing in their lives, everything like that. However, there's this other side to people on Twitter where people just feel like, yeah, I can say whatever I want to whoever I want, because they're not really they're not really gonna say anything or do anything to me. They might be on the other side of the country, the other side of the world, so I can kind of say whatever. And I don't think people take into consideration what their words are actually, doing to people. And I think it's terrible on that front that people took what she said, because she says that she didn't want to work with the performer because he worked in gay porn in the past. I don't think he still does, but he had done it in the past, and she didn't want to work with him and everything, and people called her homophobe and the whole 9 yards, and it was just tragic that people went to the lengths that they did and said things that they did to her, so just kill yourself, you're terrible, you're this, that. I just don't think we ever have to get that. I don't think we ever have to get that serious about things, especially on Twitter. I think that even if there's something that you disagree with, I always think that you can talk about it rationally like an adult. And unfortunately in this case, somebody lost her life, or took her own life because of it. I think the other thing that I just wanted to say about that situation, I just think we all got to respect each other. I think we just live in this world nowadays where people don't really, it's almost like respect has gone out the window, and we really don't respect each other the way that we should. And it's frustrating for somebody like myself, because I see so many people that I get along with and things like that, and sometimes it just seems it's like, oh, well, you can't interact with this person here, you can't interact with that person. People just don't respect. And I think we got to have respect for each other, respect for each other's beliefs. I think like you see a situation like this, and I think that I think both sides have to just sit there and say, we all got to take responsibility. We got to take to a certain, like, everybody who cyberbullied her on Twitter and whatnot, they got to take responsibility for their actions. But I also think people should take responsibility if they said something that kind of elicited that type of response. I mean, sometimes because there are also times where if you say something, I think there's some times where, people might take it the wrong way. And I think that this could have been a situation where somebody took her words totally out of context and, and I think sometimes you should understand that, like, if we say something, there's a certain sense of compassion that you should have. even if you don't necessarily see eye to eye with somebody, there is a certain sense that you should look at the other person and be like, listen, I understand where you're coming from. I may not agree with it, but as long as we don't take it to levels where people are getting hurt, people are dying, you have your beliefs, I have mine. Agree to disagree. I think that sometimes if we agree to disagree, I think that it could be good for us, and I wish that more people would do that. It's because that's just a sad situation, and I had just read about it before I came in, and it was really shocking to me. Because she had said what she said, and then a couple days later, she's gone, 23 years old. So, yeah, like it's a tragic note, and tragic for her family, for her friends, the whole 9 yards. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it. But basically, just kind of understand that your words, maybe they don't mean as much to you as they do to somebody else. And vice versa. Maybe somebody's feelings mean a lot. So yeah, I can talk about it, but just come on, people. We should do better as a society, do better as a people. I think that's all that we can do. So, on that note, I'll kind of sign off. I'll tell all you guys, check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. LAWESHOWSM. Again, LAWESHOWSM. That's the social media. Check the show out on YouTube, Life and Whatever Else, no spaces, Life and Whatever Else, no spaces. Check us out on there. That's where the show is at. And, just want to thank you guys for your continued support for the show and everything that you guys have written to me on like Instagram or whatever. And yeah, Pablo and Carlos will be back. Shout out to Pablo and Carlos. They'll be back here. We'll be having some crazy times, laughing about some things. And yeah, so they'll be back next time to kind of chat it up. And if they're not, I'll be mad. But it is what it is. Hopefully they'll come in. It'll be the last episode of 2017. And then we'll return in 2018 with a lot of guests, a lot of things that I have lined up. So all the stuff is for you guys. So once again, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram, LAWESHOWSM, LAWESHOWSM, and on YouTube, Life and Whatever Else, no spaces, Life and Whatever Else, no spaces. All right, guys, peace out. Thank you for your support, and I will talk to you next time.